My name is Lydia, and I'm 33 years old, a marketing consultant who thought she had finally found true love. He told me I was his forever, but forever ended the night I answered his phone and heard another woman call him Dr. Rowan. That's when I realized the man sleeping beside me wasn't who I loved. He was a stranger hiding behind my name, using my life as his disguise. And the worst part? I didn't just love him. I helped him build his lie. I've always been the type of woman who believed that good things come to those who wait, and for most of my adult life, I waited. I focused on my career, built my reputation in the corporate world, and convinced myself that I didn't need anyone to complete me. But when I met Nathan, everything changed. It was at a charity gala 2 years ago. I remember it vividly, the soft hum of classical music, champagne glasses clinking, and a sea of strangers dressed in black and gold. I was there for work, representing my firm's sponsorship, but I felt out of place among the glittering crowd. Then he appeared, tall, effortlessly confident, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him like it was made for his soul. His eyes met mine across the room, and he smiled in that calm, self-assured way that made everyone else seem to fade into the background. Nathan introduced himself as a real estate investor, there to support one of his clients' foundations. His voice was deep, deliberate, the kind that makes every word sound like it carries weight. We started talking, and within minutes it felt as if we had known each other for years. He asked questions about my life that no one else ever bothered to ask, my dreams, my favorite books, the kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind. When I mentioned that I loved to travel but rarely had time, he grinned and said, "Then I'll just have to take you somewhere you can forget about time." I laughed, brushing it off as flirtation, not realizing he meant every word, or that he was already laying the groundwork for something much darker. After that night, Nathan and I became inseparable. He texted me every morning, called me every night, and filled my days with affection I didn't even know I craved. Our first date was at a lakeside restaurant, where he ordered my favorite wine before I even mentioned it. He said he'd done his research. I found it charming back then, how attentive he was. He told me he traveled often for work, managing international clients, and I admired his ambition. I never questioned why he avoided details or changed the topic when I asked about his business. Within months, our relationship became the kind of whirlwind romance people write about in novels. Weekend getaways to wine country, surprise bouquets delivered to my office, handwritten notes left on my pillow saying things like, "You're the calm in my chaos." It all felt so perfect that I didn't dare question it. My friends envied us, and my parents adored him. He had that rare charm that made everyone trust him instantly. But not everyone was convinced. My best friend Sabrina, blunt, loyal, and always suspicious, pulled me aside one evening after dinner and said, "He's too perfect, Lyd. No one is that put together all the time." I laughed it off. Sabrina had always been overprotective, especially after my last breakup. I told her she was being paranoid, that Nathan was just mature and professional. Deep down, though, her words stuck with me. Sometimes late at night, Nathan would step out onto the balcony to take phone calls. He'd speak in hushed tones, pacing, saying things like, "No, that can't happen here," or "Keep it under the same name." When I asked who it was, he'd smile and say, "Just a client, high-stakes deal, nothing exciting." Then he'd change the subject, pulling me close and distracting me with that intoxicating mix of warmth and authority. As weeks turned into months, the small inconsistencies started to add up. He never brought me to his office. He said his work took him across different cities, but I never saw plane tickets, never met his business partners. Still, he introduced me to plenty of his friends, men in designer suits who always seemed to know too much about me and too little about him. They'd ask odd questions, like how long I'd lived at my address or where I kept my business records. I thought they were just making conversation. Now I realized they were assessing me, measuring how much of a liability or asset I could be. Despite the little doubts, I couldn't deny how he made me feel. Nathan had a way of making the world smaller, quieter, like everything outside our relationship didn't matter. 6 months after we met, he moved in with me. I remember the day clearly, boxes stacked neatly by the door, him joking that he'd never packed up his life so fast for anyone. We spent that evening laughing, cooking dinner together, and dancing barefoot in the living room. It felt like the start of forever. My friends said we moved too fast, but Nathan had this gift. He could make his presence feel inevitable. He wasn't pushy or overbearing. He was simply there, woven into my routines, until I couldn't imagine a day without him. We made plans to buy a house together, talked about marriage, and even started a joint savings account for our future. I thought I'd finally found peace, the kind of love built on trust and partnership. But in hindsight, that peace was too still, too perfect. I ignored the cracks because I was desperate to believe in the dream he sold me. The late-night calls, the secretive meetings, the frequent trips. I told myself it was all part of his demanding job. Love, I thought, meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Then one night, everything changed. Nathan was in the shower when his phone rang. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. The caller ID read, "Private number." I answered softly, thinking it might be urgent. On the other end, a woman's voice said, "Is this Dr. Rowan's phone?" For a second, I froze. "I'm sorry, who?" I asked. "Dr. Rowan," she repeated. "Tell him it's urgent. We have another patient waiting." Before I could respond, the line went dead. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Dr. Rowan?" I stared at the phone, confusion turning into dread. Nathan wasn't a doctor, at least not the man I knew. That night, as he walked out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, smiling like nothing was wrong, I felt my stomach twist. For the first time since we met, I looked at him and realized I didn't really know who he was. I didn't say a word, but in that moment, one thought echoed in my mind. Who exactly was Nathan, and why was someone calling him Dr. Rowan? The words Dr. Rowan kept looping in my head like a haunting melody that wouldn't stop playing. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe the woman on the phone had dialed the wrong number. Maybe Nathan was covering for a client. Maybe there was a perfectly logical explanation. But the unease was already there, whispering that something about the man sleeping beside me wasn't real. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake watching his chest rise and fall, wondering if Nathan was even his real name. By morning, I'd built up enough courage to ask. Over breakfast, I tried to sound casual, stirring my coffee slowly as I said, "Hey, your phone rang last night. A woman called you. Dr. Rowan." He didn't even flinch. He laughed, that smooth, charming laugh I used to find irresistible. "Oh, that," he said easily. "It's just a client nickname. Some of my investors like to use code names when we deal with property documents. Keeps things discreet." He reached across the table, brushed my hand, and smiled like he'd just told me a silly inside joke. But something in his eyes gave him away. They didn't match his expression. Too calm, too measured, as if he'd practiced the reaction. My stomach tightened. After that, I started seeing things differently. It was like I'd been walking through a beautifully lit room, and suddenly someone switched on a black light, revealing stains I didn't want to see. Nathan's world, which once felt polished and perfect, now seemed staged. He started taking more calls outside, always ending them abruptly when I appeared. I noticed he carried 2 phones, one I recognized, and another sleek black one he never left unattended. His drawers, once carelessly left open, were now locked, and his schedule became unpredictable. He'd tell me he was going to a meeting across town, only to return at odd hours with no explanation. I tried to brush it off, to hold on to the version of Nathan I'd fallen for, the man who made pancakes on Sundays and kissed my forehead before bed. But that version was slipping away, and I was starting to wonder if he'd ever been real. One morning, after he left for a supposed meeting, I decided to stop being naive. I needed answers. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I was protecting myself. I went to his side of the closet and carefully searched through his suit jackets. Nothing. Then I checked the nightstand drawers, the desk, even behind the photo frames. That's when I found it. Inside a leather wallet tucked deep in his travel bag was a hospital ID card. My heart nearly stopped. It had his picture, unmistakably Nathan's face, but the name beneath it read, Dr. Nathan Rowan. For a full minute, I just stared at it, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. He wasn't a real estate investor. He wasn't a consultant. According to this, he was a doctor, or pretending to be one. The ID looked official, with a barcode and hospital logo, but something felt off. The font seemed slightly misaligned, and the plastic felt thinner than normal. Still, it looked convincing enough that I knew I had to be careful. When Nathan came home that night, I acted normal. I smiled, asked about his day, kissed him like nothing was wrong. Inside, my hands were trembling. Every word he said felt like it was being measured against a new reality. Who was this man? Over the next few days, I began documenting everything. I bought a small black notebook and started writing down every strange detail. Times he left, names he mentioned, even the color of the envelopes he carried. It was the only way to keep my sanity, to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things. Eventually, I called Sabrina. She'd been right about him from the start, and I needed her help. When I told her about the ID card, she was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Lydia, you need to find out who this man really is, but before it's too late." We met that evening at a cafe, sitting in a corner booth where no one could overhear. Sabrina opened her laptop, and together we started searching online for Dr. Nathan Rowan. At first, it seemed promising. There were a few mentions of doctors with similar names, but none matched Nathan's face. No hospital rosters, no LinkedIn profiles, no photos. Nothing that proved he existed under that name. It was as if Dr. Rowan was a ghost. Sabrina frowned. "People don't just not exist, Lyd. If he's a real doctor, there'd be something." That night, I went home feeling hollow. I watched Nathan as he cooked dinner, humming softly to himself, completely at ease. How could someone hide so much behind such calm eyes? The next morning, I decided to push him, just a little. I asked where he'd studied medicine. He chuckled and said, "Why, are you planning to get sick?" I pressed again, pretending to be curious, but his tone shifted. "You're asking a lot of questions lately," he said, smiling, though his eyes didn't. I laughed it off, but my pulse was racing. That was the first time I saw a flicker of something behind the mask. Not anger, exactly, but control. Cold, deliberate control. That night, he fell asleep quickly, but I couldn't close my eyes. I kept thinking about that ID card, about the woman who'd called asking for Dr. Rowan. I thought about all the nights he'd said he was working late, all the people I'd never met, all the gaps in his story that I'd chosen to fill with trust. By midnight, I made a decision. If he wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. A week later, he said he had a business trip. He packed a small duffel bag, kissed me goodbye, and left before dawn. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my coat and followed. He drove across town, into a part of the city I didn't recognize. Quiet streets, mostly industrial buildings, the kind of place that shuts down after business hours. I parked a few blocks behind and followed on foot, keeping my distance. Nathan turned into a narrow alley and stopped outside a gray building with tinted windows. No sign, no address plate, just a blank metal door and a keypad lock. My breath caught as I watched him punch in a code and step inside. Through a crack between the blinds, I caught a glimpse of what was inside. White walls, bright lights, and people moving around in scrubs. It looked like a clinic, but nothing about it felt legitimate. When I tried searching for the address later, it didn't exist on any map. No listings, no records, nothing. And that's when the truth began to settle in. Whatever Nathan was doing, it wasn't legal. Standing in the shadows outside that nameless clinic, I realized that the man I loved might not just be lying about who he was. He might be living an entirely different life I was never meant to discover. I still remember that night like it happened yesterday. The cold air biting at my skin, the dim street lights flickering as if they too were afraid of what I was about to uncover. I parked half a block away from that strange gray building and waited until Nathan's car disappeared inside the gated alley. I sat there for a long time, just staring, debating whether I was brave or stupid for following him this far. The building was quiet, eerily so. It had no signage, no name, nothing to suggest what it was or why it existed. Just tinted windows, a steel door, and a faint hum of fluorescent light leaking from inside. It didn't look like a hospital or a clinic, more like something pretending to be one. After a few minutes, curiosity overpowered fear. I got out of the car and walked closer, my heart hammering in my chest. I kept to the shadows, the gravel crunching softly under my shoes. When I reached one of the side windows, I peered through a narrow opening in the blinds. and there he was, Nathan, standing in the middle of a sterile-looking room wearing a white coat. My breath caught. He looked every bit the doctor, confident, composed, authoritative. But the people he was talking to didn't look like patients. They were men in dark suits, not the kind who came for checkups. One of them slid an envelope across the counter toward him. Nathan opened it, glanced inside, and gave a small nod. It didn't look like a medical consultation. It looked like a transaction. I watched for several minutes, my mind spinning. None of it made sense. Why would a supposed real estate investor, or even a fake doctor, be conducting secret meetings with men like that in a clinic with no name? My stomach churned with dread, and my hands trembled as I took a step back. I decided to go around to the front, hoping to catch a nameplate or something that could explain what I'd just seen. Before I could get close, a voice startled me. "Ma'am, this is private property." I turned to see a man in a black jacket, tall and expressionless. His voice was calm, but his presence screamed authority. "Sorry," I stammered, pretending to be lost. "I thought this was the entrance to the medical center." He shook his head slowly. "No medical center here. You need to leave." His tone wasn't threatening, but there was no room for argument. I nodded, muttered an apology, and walked away. But not before noticing something chilling. The badge on his jacket didn't have a company name, just a black symbol, a triangle inside a circle. I waited in my car for hours, parked across the street, barely breathing as I watched that metal door. Around midnight, it finally opened. Nathan walked out, alone, holding an envelope. He looked around briefly before heading to his car. The way he clutched that envelope, tight, like it held something more valuable than money, made my heart sink. When he drove off, I followed from a distance, keeping my headlights dim. He went straight home, parked, and walked inside like nothing was unusual. I waited another 10 minutes before following. By the time I entered, he was sitting casually on the couch, flipping through channels. "You're up late," he said, smiling. "Couldn't sleep?" I forced a smile. "You're home late. Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said, shrugging. "House call. Client needed me to check a property issue. Long night." He lied so easily it almost sounded like the truth. But the image of that envelope, those men, that building, it was seared into my mind. I nodded, said good night, and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, I woke up to find him already gone. His side of the bed was cold, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. I sat there, numb, realizing that the man I'd fallen in love with might not just be hiding something. He might be someone entirely different. That day, I decided I needed proof. Not guesses, not suspicions, evidence. I drove to an electronics store and bought a small voice recorder, one designed to stick under a car dashboard. That evening, when Nathan was in the shower, I quietly slipped out to the garage and planted it beneath the passenger seat of his car. My hand shook so badly that I nearly dropped it. I told myself it was for my own safety. Deep down, I knew it was because I was losing trust in the person I thought was my future. For days, I tried to act normal. I laughed when he joked, cooked his favorite meals, even kissed him goodnight. But every time he left the house, I felt my stomach twist. What was he doing out there? Who were those men? And what was that place? That nameless clinic that didn't exist on any map? 3 days later, while Nathan was away again, I retrieved the recorder. I sat at the kitchen table, pressing play with trembling fingers. At first there was static, the hum of the engine, faint music, the rustle of movement. Then came his voice. At first it was just fragments of conversation, mundane, businesslike. But then the words started to shift. New clients are requesting multiple identities. We'll need the medical records to match. My heart started racing. A second voice replied, "We can process the data under the same name. Safer that way." Nathan's voice again. "Good. Lydia doesn't suspect a thing. She's my perfect cover." I stopped breathing. The silence that followed was deafening. I replayed it over and over, hoping I'd misheard, that my name wasn't really in there. But it was. Crystal clear. He wasn't just lying to me. He was using me. I wasn't his partner. I was part of his plan. My house, my name, my reputation, all shields to make his secret life look legitimate. The realization broke something inside me. The man who'd held me, whispered that I was his safe place, was using me as exactly that, a safe place, a cover to hide behind. I spent that night curled up on the floor of my living room, shaking. Everything I thought I knew, every kiss, every laugh, every late-night whisper, felt like it had been rehearsed. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand the truth, but fear held me back. If Nathan could lie so easily, if he could build an entire false identity and use mine in the process, what else was he capable of? By morning, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to know everything. But one thing was certain. The man sleeping in my bed wasn't Nathan. He was Dr. Rowan, and whatever he was doing in that clinic, I was part of it, whether I liked it or not. When I replayed the recording one last time, hearing him say, "Lydia doesn't suspect a thing. She's my perfect cover," I realized I wasn't safe, not even in my own home. The days that followed were a blur of fear, confusion, and denial. Every time Nathan smiled at me, I had to fight the urge to flinch. Every affectionate gesture felt like a performance I didn't want to be a part of anymore. My life, the life I had built so carefully, suddenly felt like a set, and I was the unwitting actress playing a role in a movie I didn't agree to star in. Once I knew what he'd said on that recording, I couldn't unhear it. "She's my perfect cover." The words echoed in every quiet moment, poisoning everything I thought we had. My mind began piecing together memories like evidence at a crime scene. The company mail that started arriving in my name. The joint bank account he opened for us. The business papers I signed without reading because he'd smiled and said, "It's just tax stuff, babe." I'd trusted him, and in doing so, I'd given him the keys to my entire identity. I started digging, quietly and methodically. I pulled up online banking statements, my email archives, even old mail I had tossed aside. That's when the pattern started to emerge. There were new accounts, investment portfolios, medical supply orders, real estate registrations, all under my name. But the signatures, they weren't mine. It felt like I was unraveling someone else's life, except that someone else was me. One afternoon, I went to the mailbox and found an envelope addressed to Lydia Rowan. My stomach dropped. Rowan, his supposed alias. Inside were invoices for medical equipment shipments, worth thousands of dollars. The return address matched the street where the nameless clinic stood. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at those papers, my heart pounding so hard it made my hands shake. Every inch of my life, my clean record, my stable job, my apartment, had been repurposed as a mask for him. He was hiding behind me, using my normalcy to give legitimacy to whatever illegal world he was running. When I told Sabrina, she nearly screamed through the phone, "Lydia, you have to go to the police. This is serious. He's committing fraud in your name." But I wasn't ready. Not yet. If I went to the police without proof and Nathan found out, he could easily turn the tables. He had the charm, the calm demeanor, the fake documentation. I'd seen firsthand how easily he could twist reality. I needed evidence that couldn't be denied. So I played along. I smiled when he came home. I asked about his day. I cooked dinner like everything was normal, but inside I was a storm, terrified that one wrong look would give me away. At night, when he fell asleep, I crept out of bed and searched the house. The first place I looked was his desk. He'd started locking the drawers, but I'd found the spare key taped under the lamp weeks earlier. Inside, I discovered stacks of paperwork, business licenses, tax forms, and medical import records. Almost every document bore my name somewhere on it. Some had my old signature copied perfectly, others slightly off, but enough to pass. One folder caught my eye. It was labeled Aries Holdings, LLC. I didn't recognize the name. Inside were registration forms filed under my name as Chief Operations Manager. My address, my email, even my cell number. But the company had accounts linked to multiple international wire transfers. Millions of dollars had flowed through it, all under my identity. That was the night I realized the full scope of what he'd done. Nathan hadn't just used me as emotional camouflage. He'd built an entire financial and legal web around me. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was his alibi. My rage boiled so hot I could barely breathe. How long had he planned this? Since the beginning. Had every kiss, every I love you been part of the manipulation? I wanted to confront him, to scream until my voice broke, but then the fear hit. What if he knew I'd found out? What if that calm, polished man wasn't just deceitful, but dangerous? That thought kept me silent. Instead, I began keeping digital backups of everything I found. I scanned documents, took photos with my phone, and stored them in a hidden drive Sabrina helped me encrypt. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't bear to admit how deep it went, but I told her enough. She was my lifeline, my anchor in a reality that felt more twisted by the day. Every new discovery added another layer to the horror. I found an email thread between Nathan and a man named Lucas Vance discussing identity packages, verified clean clients, and record merging. I didn't fully understand the terminology, but the implication was clear. They were creating new identities, merging real and fake documentation to make it undetectable. The worst part was that all of it was happening through accounts that looked like mine. My email address, my credit card statement, even my tax records had been altered. He had created an entire digital version of me, one that worked for him, obeyed him, and couldn't fight back. It became harder to act normal. My nerves were constantly frayed. I jumped at every sound, flinched every time his phone buzzed. Nathan noted. "You've been tense lately," he said one night while pouring water. "Work stress?" I smiled tightly. "Yeah, deadlines." He grinned, leaned closer, and said, "You should take time off. Maybe we can go somewhere remote for a few weeks. No distractions." The suggestion sent a chill down my spine. Remote? No distractions? I laughed it off, pretending it sounded wonderful, but every instinct screamed that it was a trap. The next day, I started checking the mail more obsessively. More fake invoices. More letters for Rowan Medical Imports. It became clear that his entire operation revolved around me. My name gave his dealings credibility. Without me, his empire would crumble. I thought about running, about packing a bag and disappearing, but the thought of him finding me, or framing me, if he could create a doctor out of thin air, create a criminal version of me. So I stayed, pretending to be the perfect partner, while cataloging every lie he built. One night, as I sat at the desk going through papers, I noticed a small drawer I hadn't opened before. It didn't have a lock, but it was wedged shut. When I finally pried it open, I found something that made my blood run cold. A passport. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The photo was Nathan's, unmistakably him, but the name printed beneath it wasn't Nathan Rowan. It was Nathan Hale, with my last name. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My throat closed. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I flipped through the pages. Stamps, visas, even a marriage notation listing me as his spouse. None of it was real, but it was official enough to pass scrutiny. He hadn't just stolen my name. He'd rewritten it into his world. He'd built a version of us that didn't exist. I stared at that passport for a long time, realizing just how deep his deceit ran. I wasn't just his cover anymore. I was his creation. As I slid the passport back into the drawer, I heard the front door creak open. Nathan was home early, and I still had the document in my hands. The passport wouldn't leave my mind. Even after I'd tucked it back into the drawer and pretended everything was fine, I couldn't stop replaying the image. Nathan's face, my last name, and that faintly wrong background behind his photo. It looked doctored, like it had been edited onto someone else's paperwork. The lighting was off, the edges slightly blurred, and the signature didn't quite match his handwriting. I'd seen enough forged documents in his files to recognize one when I saw it. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, the quiet rhythm of Nathan's breathing beside me. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the questions circling like vultures. Who was Dr. Rowan? What exactly was he doing with my name? And most importantly, how many people were involved? By morning, I'd made up my mind. I had to go back to the clinic. I waited until Nathan left for one of his meetings. My pulse quickened as I grabbed my keys and drove toward that bleak part of town again, rehearsing excuses in my head in case someone recognized me. The clinic looked the same as before, quiet, anonymous, like it was trying to disappear into the street itself. I parked across the road, turned off the engine, and watched. For over an hour, nothing happened. I was about to give up when the door finally opened. A woman stepped out, and for a moment I thought I was looking at my own reflection. She had long, dark hair, just like mine, styled in soft waves that brushed her shoulders. She wore a cream trench coat almost identical to the one hanging in my closet. Even the faint scent that drifted across the street when she passed, jasmine and vanilla, was my perfume, the one Nathan bought me for my birthday. My breath caught. The resemblance was uncanny. I ducked down in my seat, heart hammering. Was this a coincidence, or was she part of whatever Nathan was doing? The woman walked with quick, confident steps, her heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. A black sedan pulled up, and she climbed in. I turned my car on and followed at a distance, careful to keep two vehicles between us. She stopped at a small cafe a few blocks away, one of those quiet places tucked between office buildings. She sat at a corner table, ordered coffee, and started scrolling on her phone. A few minutes later, the bell above the door jingled, and Nathan walked in. My stomach dropped. He spotted her immediately, smiled, and leaned down to kiss her. Not a quick, friendly peck, a real kiss. Familiar, intimate, the kind that used to make my knees go weak. I felt sick. I wanted to storm inside and demand answers, but I forced myself to stay hidden. My instincts told me this was bigger than infidelity. This was something calculated. I cracked the window slightly, holding my phone up just enough to record the conversation through the small gap. Nathan sat opposite her, his voice low but clear. "We need to make the next transfer before Friday. The account's already verified under her name." Her name? My name? The woman, Elena, I would soon learn, sipped her coffee and said, "I told you, the bank flagged the last one. Too many transfers under the same identity will trigger another review." He leaned closer, voice sharp. "Then we'll create another alias. Lydia's records are clean. We'll use her address again." I almost dropped my phone. My throat tightened. They weren't just using me as cover. They were duplicating me. Elena glanced at him, then smirked. "You sure she won't notice?" "She doesn't suspect a thing," Nathan said smoothly. "She's too in love to question me." A cruel laugh escaped her lips. "You said the same thing about the last one." The last one? My chest constricted. How many women had there been before me? How many versions of this exact scene had he played out with others? I zoomed in on the recording, my hands trembling. The camera caught everything. Their faces, their words, their coordination. It was all there. Undeniable proof that Nathan wasn't just a liar. He was running a network, and I was one of his props. As I listened, the pieces started falling into place. The fake passport, the forged signatures, the fake business registrations. They all connected back to the same scheme. Nathan had been creating parallel identities for his clients using real people as templates, clean records, verified addresses, authentic documentation, all stolen from women like me. But why someone who looked like me? I studied Elena's posture, her expressions, the way she moved. Everything about her felt like a mirror image, deliberate and rehearsed. The way she held her cup, the jewelry she wore, even the nail color, soft nude, pink, was exactly what Nathan always said he loved on me. The realization hit like a gut punch. He hadn't just built his operation around me, he'd replicated me. Elena was my replacement, my duplicate. The nausea rose so fast I had to press a hand over my mouth. My life, my style, my very identity, all being copied and commodified as part of his scheme. Nathan and Elena spoke for nearly half an hour, unaware they were being watched. I recorded everything, barely breathing, praying they wouldn't notice my car across the street. When they finally stood to leave, Nathan placed a hand on her lower back, a gesture I knew too well. He whispered something, and she laughed softly, her head tilting the same way mine did when I was nervous. I watched them walk out together, my heart breaking and hardening all at once. But then something happened that froze me completely. As they reached the car, Elena stopped suddenly. She turned her head slightly, scanning the street, and her eyes locked on mine. Even from that distance, I knew she saw me. Her gaze was steady, unflinching, almost amused. And then slowly, she smiled. Not a kind smile, not a startled one, but the kind that says, "I know exactly who you are." It felt like my lungs collapsed. I dropped my phone, fumbling to start the engine, my entire body shaking. She whispered something to Nathan, who turned around sharply. But by then, I was already pulling away from the curb. my tires screeching against the asphalt. My hands were slick with sweat as I drove aimlessly through the city, my pulse pounding so hard it made my vision blur. She knew me. She wasn't just some stranger Nathan was using. She recognized me. That smile haunted me for the rest of the night. Back home, I replayed the footage over and over, zooming in on her face. The resemblance was terrifying. She didn't just look like me. She moved like me, behaved like me, almost as if she'd studied me. And then it hit me. If Nathan was forging identities, maybe Elena wasn't her real name. Maybe she was another creation, another version of me, built to serve a different part of his operation. But if that were true, what did that make me? The original, the prototype, or just one more version waiting to be erased? As I stared at the frozen frame of Elena's face on my phone screen, her smirk burned into my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just aware of me. She was warning me. The morning after I saw Elena with Nathan, I woke up with a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. My mind replayed the image of her face, that knowing smile, the way she looked at me like she'd been waiting for me to notice her. I tried to convince myself it had just been paranoia, that she couldn't possibly know who I was. But deep down, I knew that look. It was the look of someone who recognized me, not from a chance encounter, but from a plan. I spent the night tossing and turning, afraid Nathan would sense something was wrong. When he kissed my forehead before leaving for work, I barely managed to keep from recoiling. As soon as the door closed, I exhaled and checked my phone for the recording from the cafe again, as if maybe this time I'd hear something different. I didn't. The truth was already out there. Nathan was running something big, and Elena was in it with him. I showered, dressed, and went to the office, determined to act normal. I thought being surrounded by coworkers would make me feel safe, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Around noon, my assistant buzzed me. "There's a woman here asking for you," she said. "Says she's a consultant for one of your partner firms." My stomach twisted before I even looked up. A tall woman walked in, perfectly dressed in a cream blazer, her hair glossy, her expression calm and polished. Elena. For a split second, I forgot how to breathe. She extended her hand with a professional smile. "Lydia, right? I'm Elena Marlowe. Nathan mentioned you. He said you'd be handling some of the client paperwork." Her voice was smooth, measured, practiced. The same voice I'd heard in the cafe the night before. My mind screamed, but my mouth smiled. "Yes, of course," I said, shaking her hand. "Nice to meet you." Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp. There was no warmth behind them, just calculation. She sat down, crossing her legs elegantly. "Nathan speaks highly of you," she said. "Says you're meticulous, loyal." Every word felt like a knife disguised as a compliment. "I do my best," I replied, keeping my tone light. "How long have you two been working together?" She tilted her head slightly. "Oh, a while now. Nathan and I go back quite some time." There was something deliberate in her pause, like she wanted me to hear. I smiled, pretending not to notice. "That must make things easier," I said, keeping my hand steady even as my heart pounded in my chest. Elena nodded slowly, eyes flicking over me, like she was studying every expression, every move. Then she leaned in slightly and said, "It's interesting. You and I have similar taste." My throat went dry. She didn't explain what she meant, and I didn't ask. Instead, she gathered her folder, stood up gracefully, and said, "I'll be in touch." Then she left, just like that. Calm, composed, as if she hadn't just walked into my life and turned it upside down. As soon as she was gone, I closed my office door and pressed my back against it, trembling. The scent of her perfume still hung in the air. Jasmine and vanilla. My scent. That was when the terror started to evolve into something else. Realization. She wasn't just someone Nathan was cheating with. She was part of it. Part of him. That night, I pulled up my laptop and began searching every version of her name I could think of. Elena. Marlowe. E. Marlowe. Elena M. Even reverse image searches from her photos. Nothing legitimate came up. No LinkedIn, no high school records, no public data. Her social media accounts were picture perfect. Luxury hotels, designer clothes, champagne dinners. But something about them was wrong. None of the photos were tagged. No friends, no family, no background history. Every image looked carefully staged, curated to project the illusion of wealth and credibility. I called Sabrina, who by now knew enough not to question my sanity. "Can you run a background search for me?" I asked. "Name's Elena Marlowe. I need to know if she's real." A few hours later, she called back, her voice tight. "Lyd, there's nothing. No birth records, no driver's license, no social security number. It's like she didn't exist before 2023. My blood ran cold. 2 years ago? "Yeah," Sabrina said. "Around the same time Nathan moved in with you." That was the missing piece. Nathan and Elena hadn't just created fake documents, they'd created people. Using real names, clean histories, and verified addresses, mine among them. I was the foundation of one of those false identities, a living, breathing front. Nathan wasn't just committing fraud, he was laundering identities. The realization sent shivers down my spine. Wealthy clients, criminals, fugitives, whoever could pay, would buy fake personas through Nathan's network. Elena, it seemed, played the social side, pretending to be those identities in person, giving them physical presence. And I was the cover, the legitimate version, the proof that Lydia Rowan existed, that her business and finances were authentic. I wanted to throw up. I felt dirty, violated in a way that went beyond betrayal. My life had been cloned, corrupted, sold. That night, while Nathan slept, I went through every document again. I photographed each one, labeling them carefully. Aries Holdings, Rowan Medical, Elena Marlowe, Nathan Hale. I even backed up the voice recordings I'd made of him before. My hands were shaking, but my focus had never been clearer. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore. I was preparing for war. Every new file I opened revealed more evidence of their operation. Offshore accounts, encrypted messages, invoices for consulting services that matched none of my business records. I was staring at a criminal empire built on fabricated lives, mine among them. Around midnight, I got a notification on my phone. Unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, my pulse quickening. The message read, "We need to talk, before Nathan kills you." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, rereading it over and over, hoping I was imagining it. But the number wasn't Nathan's. It wasn't Sabrina's either. I copied it, ran a quick search, and froze when I saw the contact photo attached to the number's metadata. Elena. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, my mind spinning. Was this a trap, or was she actually trying to warn me? The words, "before Nathan kills you," replayed in my head like a drumbeat. Was he planning to eliminate me? To erase the original version of the identity once he no longer needed me? I looked over at Nathan's sleeping form, peaceful, harmless, almost angelic in the low light. But now I knew better. That calm face hid a monster capable of reinventing people, erasing them, and maybe even killing them to tie up loose ends. I couldn't run. Not yet. But one thing was certain. Whatever Elena wanted, she wasn't reaching out to make friends. As I stared at her message glowing on my screen, "Before Nathan kills you," my phone buzzed again. Another text, just one word this time. "Tomorrow." The next day crawled by, every minute dragging under the weight of fear and anticipation. I didn't respond to Elena's message right away. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend I'd never seen those words. "Before Nathan kills you." But curiosity and dread kept pulling me back. If she really knew what he was capable of, maybe she was my only chance to survive. After hours of pacing, I finally texted back, "Where?" Her reply came instantly. "Eastview Cafe, back entrance, noon." I didn't tell Sabrina. I couldn't. I didn't even want to think about what she'd say if she knew I was willingly walking into a meeting with the woman who looked like me, the woman helping destroy my life. But I had to know the truth. I needed to understand what Nathan had built and why I was part of it. The next morning, I left work early, telling my boss I had a client meeting. I drove to Eastview Cafe, a small, quiet place at the edge of town, far enough from Nathan's usual haunts to feel hidden. I parked out back, checked my phone twice to make sure my location was off, and stepped inside. Elena was already there. She sat at a corner table, wearing dark sunglasses despite the dim light. She looked the same as before, perfect, polished, unnervingly calm. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "You came?" I didn't return the smile. "You said Nathan was going to kill me. Start talking." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit down, Lydia. You'll want to hear this." I sat, but I kept my hands close to my purse where I'd hidden a small recording device. Elena leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Nathan and I started working together 4 years ago. He was charming, clever, but most importantly, ruthless. I built the system, the identity laundering network, but he perfected it." I frowned. "Identity laundering?" She nodded. "Rich clients, criminals, people who needed clean records and new lives. We used real people, women like you, as templates. You had stable careers, clean credit, verified addresses. It made the fake identities look legitimate." My stomach turned. "So you steal people's lives?" "Borrow," she corrected with a small smirk. "At first, it's easier to delete someone when the new version of them already exists in the system." I froze. "Delete?" Her eyes met mine, sharp and unflinching. "You're the last version, Lydia. When Nathan's done with you, he'll erase the real you, just like the others." My pulse spiked. "The others?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were photos, passports, ID cards, birth certificates, all women, all different faces, and yet each had a trace of similarity. Same hair color, same build, same faint resemblance to me. 5 women, Elena said softly, all gone, missing, moved, or presumed dead. Each one used as a foundation for a client's new life. I felt sick. My throat burned as I whispered, "He killed them?" Her silence was answer enough. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The cafe sounds, the soft music, the clinking cups, faded into background noise. The man I'd loved, the man who'd slept beside me for nearly 2 years, wasn't just a liar. He was a predator who built his empire by consuming people's identities and their lives. Elena spoke again, her voice low. "I was his partner, but I started noticing changes. He became paranoid, secretive. He wanted full control. When he met you, I realized what he was doing, replacing me." I looked at her, confused. "Replacing you with me?" She nodded. "He started modeling new profiles after yours, using your address, your career, even your voice patterns for verification calls. I warned him it was risky, but he didn't care. You made him look legitimate. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but I stayed still, gripping the edge of the table. So why warn me now? Why not let him finish what he started?" She sighed, taking off her sunglasses. Without them, she looked older, tired, haunted. "Because he did the same thing to me. He stole my designs, erased my trail, and nearly had me killed. I've been in hiding for months, but I can't run forever. And if you're still alive, you might be my... You want me to help." "I want us to help each other," she said. "You have access to things I don't. His home, his computer, his files. If we combine what we both know, we can bring him down." I studied her face, searching for any trace of sin. Everything about her screamed, but she wasn't wrong. I couldn't do this. "Fine," I said slowly. "But I want proof. Real proof." She smiled faintly and opened another folder. Inside were documents covered in foreign stamps and offshore seals. "These are bank statements," she explained. "Nathan's hidden accounts. Millions laundered through shell companies, some tied to illegal clinics where fake medical licenses are created. And here," she handed me a photocopy of a passport, "is one of his real identities. Nathan Rowe, Nathan Hale, Dr. Rowan. They're all him. Different faces, same operation." I felt the room spin. "You're telling me he's not even Nathan?" Elena shrugged. "That name was probably stolen from someone else, too." I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, fake university diplomas, lists of clients marked by code names. Every piece painted the same horrifying picture. Nathan wasn't just part of a fraud ring. He was the fraud ring. The architect. I swallowed hard. "How many people has he done this to?" "Dozens," Elena said softly. "But he's getting sloppy and paranoid. That's why I reached out. He's unraveling." I looked at her. "Then we have to stop him." Her lips curved into a small, cold smile. "That's the plan." We spent the next hour trading information. Names, emails, transaction codes. I told her about the recording in his car, the documents I'd copied, the fake passport I'd found. She added details about his contacts overseas and the clinic's real purpose, a front for transferring medical records used to build synthetic identities. By the time I left, I had enough information to expose him, or die trying. As I drove home, a strange sense of focus settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control. I wasn't just a pawn anymore. I was part of the fight. But that calm didn't last. That night, Nathan came home earlier than usual. He was quiet, too quiet. His movements felt deliberate, his eyes darker than normal. I tried to act casual. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "You're home early." He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me. Then, slowly, he lifted something from behind his back. My phone. My blood ran cold. "Who's Elena?" he asked softly. The air left my lungs. I tried to speak, but my voice came out barely a whisper. I don't know what you mean." He stepped closer, eyes locked on mine, his tone still calm but deadly. "Don't lie to me, Lydia." My heart pounded as he placed my phone on the counter, the screen still lit with the last message from Elena, the one that said, "Before Nathan kills you." The moment I saw my phone in Nathan's hand, my entire body went cold. I could feel my pulse in my throat, each beat screaming that this was it, the moment everything would come undone. He knew. He turned the screen toward me, and there it was, Elena's message still glowing under the harsh kitchen light. "Before Nathan kills you." His eyes met mine, and I didn't recognize him anymore. They were sharp, cold, and utterly devoid of the warmth I'd once fallen for. "Who is she?" he asked again, his tone deceptively calm. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. She's a client, from work. You must have seen her name in an email, or..." He slammed the phone onto the counter, the crack of glass slicing through the air. "Don't lie to me." My breath hitched. "I'm not..." "Don't." His voice sharpened like a blade. "You think I don't know you've been following me? Recording me? You think I wouldn't notice the missing files, the unlocked drawers, the GPS on my car?" Every word made the room smaller, the air tighter. My hands trembled as I took a step back. "Nathan, Stop saying my name," he snapped. "You don't even know who I am." He was right, but hearing it out loud hit like a punch to the chest. The man standing in front of me wasn't the Nathan who used to make pancakes on Sundays, or whisper that I was his world. This was someone else entirely, calculated, dangerous, and cornered. "I've done everything for you," he said, his voice rising. "I gave you a life most people dream of. I made you important. And this is how you repay me?" "By finding out the truth?" I shot back before I could stop myself. His expression darkened instantly. "Truth," he repeated, almost laughing. "You couldn't handle the truth even if I handed it to you." He moved closer, his shadow stretching across the floor until it reached my feet. "You were supposed to be grateful, Lydia. You were supposed to stay quiet." My voice shook. "Grateful for what? For being your puppet? For living in your lie?" His hand shot out so fast I flinched, half expecting him to hit me. But he didn't. Instead, he grabbed my wrist tightly, pulling me closer. "You don't understand what's at stake," he hissed. "You've seen things you shouldn't have, and people don't just walk away after that." I struggled to pull free, my mind spinning. I had to stay calm. If I pushed him too far, I knew what he was capable of. "Please, Nathan," I said softly, forcing tears into my eyes. "You're scaring me. Just tell me what's going on." He released my wrist suddenly and took a step back, pacing like a caged animal. "You wouldn't get it," he muttered. "You're not built for this." "This?" I asked quietly. "You mean the lies? The fake companies? The stolen lives?" That stopped him. His head snapped toward me, fury flashing behind his eyes. "You think you're clever?" he said, voice low now, dangerously low. "You think you've pieced it all together? You have no idea what I've built, or who's behind it. You're just a name, a clean record, a shell. Without me, you're nothing." I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to run, but my body wouldn't move. He stepped closer again, his voice turning colder. "You were never supposed to find out," he said. "But Elena, she just couldn't help herself, could she? She always hated that I picked you." I blinked. Picked me? He smiled then, a chilling, humorless smile. You were perfect, smart, innocent, invisible. You made everything look legitimate. My investors trusted me because of you. The banks approved transactions because your name was clean. You were my camouflage. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let him see me break. So that's all I was to you? A cover? His smile faded. You were useful, he said flatly. Until you weren't. Something inside me snapped. You ruined my life, I shouted. You took everything from me. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. Not yet, he said. But I will if I have to. That was when I saw it, the flicker of something behind his calm. Desperation, paranoia. He wasn't just angry, he was unraveling, and that made him even more dangerous. He moved toward the counter, picked up my shattered phone, and hurled it against the wall. You won't be calling anyone, he said. Then he reached behind him, pulled the deadbolt on the door, and turned the key with a slow, deliberate click. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear his next words. You should have just kept playing your part. He stepped closer, and I took a step back. My smartwatch vibrated faintly. I'd triggered the recording function while he was distracted. Every word he said was being saved. I needed him to keep talking. Why, Nathan? I asked, keeping my voice soft, trembling. Why me? Because you look like someone who'd never lie, he said. People trust your kind, the quiet ones. You made everything easy. His words came faster now, the confessions spilling out as if he couldn't stop himself. I built something bigger than you could ever imagine, a network of names, faces, lives, politicians, businessmen, they all owe me. And you? You were my proof, my trophy, my reminder that I could rewrite anyone. He took another step toward me, the rage building in his face. You think you can expose me? You think anyone will believe you? You're already in it, Lydia. Your name's on every document, every account. As far as the world's concerned, you're me. He was right. Legally, I was tangled in his crimes. But emotionally, he just handed me what I needed. His confession. Nathan, please, I whispered. You don't have to do this. Oh, I do, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because if I can't control you, I'll erase you. He lunged. I stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the kitchen island. My smartwatch kept recording as I screamed. He grabbed my arm, shoving me against the wall. I struggled, kicking, clawing at his hands. Stop fighting me, he roared. Let me go. For a moment, it felt like time slowed. The sound of my own ragged breathing filled the room. Then suddenly, something else. Sirens. They grew louder, closer, until flashing red and blue lights bled through the windows. Nathan froze, his grip loosening just enough for me to shove him back. His head turned toward the window, confusion flashing across his face. Then a loud bang. The front door. Crashing open. Police! Don't move! Nathan spun toward the noise just as two officers rushed in, guns drawn. He didn't resist, just lifted his hands slowly, a strange calm returning to his face. As they handcuffed him, he glanced at me, and for a moment I thought I saw fear. But then his lips curled into a grin. As they dragged him toward the door, he turned his head and shouted, You'll never be safe, Lydia. You don't know who you're really dealing with. The words echoed through the house long after the sirens faded. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, my smartwatch still recording his final threat. For the first time, I realized that even though Nathan was gone, the shadow he'd cast over my life was far from over. I stared at the broken phone, the shattered glass glinting under the lights, and whispered to myself, what if he's right? Months passed. Time moved differently after Nathan's arrest. Slow at first, heavy and disorienting, like the world was adjusting to a version of itself without him in it. In those first few weeks, I barely recognized my own reflection. My face looked older somehow, sharper. There was a strange stillness in my eyes, the kind that only comes after surviving something that should have destroyed you. Nathan's capture made headlines. It turned out his arrest had been part of a much larger operation, one that spanned multiple countries. When the police raided the nameless clinic, they found everything. Forged passports, stolen medical records, counterfeit documents, unregistered accounts. The name Dr. Nathan Rowan was just one of dozens he had used. The network he'd built was massive, a spiderweb of deceit that reached into banking systems, government records, and private databases. I sat through hours of interviews with investigators, each session peeling back another layer of his lies. Every new revelation hurt, but each one also gave me closure. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Everything I had suspected, every instinct, every gut feeling, had been right. He had been using me from the start. When the news broke, my name appeared in the reports, not as an accomplice, thankfully, but as a key witness. Still, it took months to clear my record to prove that the companies, accounts, and transactions weren't mine. The authorities eventually confirmed I was a victim of identity laundering, a term I didn't even know existed before him. And through it all, Sabrina never left my side. She came to every hearing, sat through every debriefing, and stayed up with me on nights when I couldn't sleep. She was the one who reminded me again and again, "You survived something extraordinary. Don't let it define you. Let it shape you." It wasn't easy. Some days, I woke up terrified that the knock on the door would be someone connected to him. Other days, I felt the smallest flicker of peace, a quiet awareness that maybe, just maybe, I was free. Elena testified once under heavy protection. Her testimony exposed the full scale of Nathan's crimes: money laundering, identity fraud, even suspected disappearances linked to former covers. I saw her only once across the courtroom. She looked nothing like the woman I'd met at that cafe. Her perfect hair was gone, replaced by a simple ponytail. Her designer clothes were traded for neutral tones. She didn't look powerful anymore. She looked tired, fragile. Our eyes met briefly, and for a moment I felt something close to empathy. We had both been manipulated, used, reshaped into tools for his schemes. But she had known what she was part of. I hadn't. After her testimony, she vanished. No forwarding address, no trace. The last message I ever got from her came weeks later. "Now we're even." I never knew what she meant. Did she feel guilt, relief, or was it just her way of closing the chapter? I stopped wondering after a while. Some ghosts don't deserve to linger. Nathan's trial lasted almost a year. He refused to plead guilty, smirking through most of the proceedings like he was still playing a game, only he knew the rules too. But the evidence was overwhelming. My recordings, Elena's testimony, the files I'd collected. He was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to decades in federal prison. When the judge read the verdict, I didn't cry. I thought I would, after everything he'd done. But instead, I just felt empty. Justice doesn't erase the damage. It just stops the bleeding. After the trial, I moved out of the city. Too many memories haunted that apartment. The balcony where he'd made secret calls, the kitchen where he'd confessed everything, the bedroom where I'd once believed I was loved. I found a small place in another state, near the coast. It wasn't much. One bedroom, creaky floors, a view of the sea, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, my name was clean, my signature, my own. I started therapy. At first, I couldn't talk about him without shaking, but with time, I learned how to separate the woman I was with him from the woman I became because of him. My therapist once said, "Survivors don't return to who they were before. They rebuild into someone stronger." And she was right. Piece by piece, I rebuilt my life. I started writing, not about him directly, but about women who trusted too much, who loved too deeply, who got caught in webs, spun by men who saw compassion as weakness. I launched a blog that grew into a project called Behind the Mask, a platform for survivors of deception, manipulation, and psychological abuse. The first story I published was mine. It was terrifying, putting it out there. But the messages I received afterward, from women across the country, some even across the world, made me realize I wasn't alone. My pain had a purpose. Sabrina still calls me every Sunday. We laugh again now. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't hurt. She teases me about my quiet coastal life, about how I've turned trauma into a brand, as she puts it. But she's proud, and so am I. Some nights I still dream of him. Not the nightmare kind, just flashes. His smile, his voice, the way he used to look at me like I was his entire world. But when I wake up, I don't miss him. I pity him. He taught me the hardest truth of all. Sometimes evil hides behind tenderness. Sometimes love is just a disguise. Every once in a while, I'll be out walking near the pier and I'll catch a glimpse of someone who looks like him. Same stride, same broad shoulders, and my chest tightens for a split second. But then I remind myself, he's gone. He doesn't control me anymore. The fear he left behind is fading, replaced by something stronger. Freedom. The scars are still there, invisible but real. The difference now is that they no longer define me. They remind me of what I survived, of who I became, of the strength it took to reclaim my name, my life, and my voice. My story isn't one of loss anymore, it's one of reclamation. And if sharing it means another woman sees the signs sooner, walks away faster, or trusts herself louder, then every bruise to my heart was worth it. There's a quote I keep above my desk now, one I wrote the day after Nathan was sentenced. The truth doesn't destroy you, it frees you, even when it breaks you first. That's what my life became. Proof that the broken can still rise, that deception can't destroy authenticity, and that no mask, no matter how carefully crafted, lasts forever. In the end, I learned that sometimes love isn't what blinds you. It's the hope that it was ever real. Nathan's lies may have stolen pieces of my life, but they couldn't take the strength I found after him. I rebuilt myself from the ruins he left behind, stronger and wiser than the woman he tried to break. Because when someone pretends to love you to hide their truth, the best revenge is living freely in yours. My name is Lydia, and no matter what he took from me, he'll never take that again. I shared my story not for sympathy, but to remind others that even the people closest to us can wear masks we never see coming. If my truth made you feel something, even for a moment, let it live on by sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me this: would you rather uncover a painful truth or keep living in a beautiful lie?